Hey everyone, welcome to another DoneJS community hangout for, what is the day? September 14th. Wow, it's already September 14th, 2018. And with us today, we have a few DoneJS contributors. First, hi Kevin, how's it going?
Hey, it's going good. How are you?
Going well, going well. Mike,
Hey, what's up, everyone?
Mike Dane, right? That's
Mike Dane, yeah.
okay. And lastly, we have our humble leader, Justin.
I don't know how to follow up the Great Dane.
Yeah, so hope everyone's doing good out there. Hopefully no one's in the hurricane path. Mike, where do you live? I think I know where you live.
I live in Eastern Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay. So I think you're okay.
I'm safe.
Right.
I'm good.
You're pretty landlocked there. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead, jump right into demos. Is there any big announcements that we have for any big releases? Well, there is a big can route release, which I'll talk about. That was recently happened.
We had a couple minor CanJS releases, but
Right.
I think we'll talk about them in demos. Probably.
Yeah, we broke a few things, but then fixed it quickly afterwards.
That happens. Always happens.
Thanks,
Not purposely, but yeah.
Never.
Thanks to everyone who found issues that we fixed. So,
Kevin, you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah. So I have been working on the testing guide. So that is also my demo. So hopefully you guys can see that. So the only thing that's landed so far in the testing guide is the section on testing view models. Hopefully today I will land the stuff on testing components and testing routing. But for right now, if you go to canjs.com under guides, there's this new testing guide. I also published the logic guide really more as a placeholder so I could link to it from the testing guide. That'll be the next thing that I work on. But so far this goes through a few different things. First, it's got a basic setup for how to test a view model. All of these things have code pens, so you can click on these links and actually see how this works. And actually, it's got the view model here, and then we've got our tests, and you can actually see the test page over here, which is kind of cool. So the basic setup is basically just like you can set properties and assert other properties are correct, and you can call functions and insert that other properties are correct, that kind of stuff. Really simple. Hopefully most of your tests in CanJS look like this, very simple. But if not, it also goes into some more complex stuff like how to test asynchronous behavior. So this example is like you can type, and then if you stop typing for half a second, it'll actually update the values, which is kind of cool. But testing this is a little bit harder. You have to do some more work. You have to actually understand what events get triggered and how to listen to them, that kind of thing. So this got a test for that. Also, this one you can see takes 500 milliseconds because that's the timeout that I have in there. And then there's some other things, deriving properties from asynchronous values. So this is using a promise, and we're actually deriving a value from that. So this is showing you how to overwrite that promise so you can pass in your own value for your test. And then the last value is how to test something that's using a module that's being imported. So in this case, it's importing this to-do connection and calling get list, but this really could be anything. Some people have a singleton for their app state and they're importing that. So this is showing you how you can make that a default value and then use this to-do connection to be able to test that with a value that you pass into your test. So yeah, that's it. Take a look at this. Hopefully some more interesting stuff we'll get in there today. Be able to publish that this afternoon, hopefully. So take a look. Let me know what you think.
Wonderful, Kevin. Thank you. Mike, you want to go?
Yeah, absolutely. So for the last week, I've been working with one of our frameworks called Ilum, which basically uses React, and it allows you to add observable view models to React components. So it's kind of similar to if you've ever used Redux, where you can connect the view and kind of the view model. It's similar, so you can connect those two things together. So I've been working on updating some of the demos that are in Ilum to use some of the newer stuff that they've been developing. So I'll share my screen. So the first one was a to-do, a to-do list example. And this is kind of an example that if you've read the CanJS docs, you've probably seen before, but you can just, check off to-dos and stuff. And one of the cool things was while I was building out these examples was, ran into a couple different bugs and I was able to fix them. So one bug we ran into was where if you're over here in the active tab, if you click on one of these, it's supposed to disappear, but as you can see, it's not disappearing. So that was a bug that was caused when a parent component passes in an observable list into a child component. It doesn't actually pass in the new value. So we were able to fix that bug, and I was able to update the demo to work. And then over here, I also worked on this chat app. So you can chat, you can put in your name, and then you can type in messages. So if you're interested in using observables with React, Ilum is actually a pretty cool framework, and I would recommend checking it out. So that's basically what I've been working on.
Awesome. Very good, Mike. All right, Justin, you want to go? By the way, 4 of. I said, was there any new big releases? We released 4 of. It's crazy that since we went all modular and stuff, we don't celebrate the minor releases as much as we probably should. That's one of the benefits is we don't have to break stuff. It's very nice. Anyways.
Yeah, that was what I was alluding to. I figured Justin would present it. So.
Yeah, I'll present that. I was just making a demo of it right here. Value. Oh, screen a little bigger here. So it's not, this just landed, but it's I've been using it this week and finding a few bugs in it, so it's still it can be used a few places, like it's being used here and works. There's a few things still broken, so for another week at least, use with some caution as all the kinks are worked out of this thing. But effectively, this might be the new style of writing instead of the each helper and having to do scope walking all the time. We're going to make helpers that create variables, very similar to how JavaScript makes variables, and then you could just access those. So you can see here the context is kept within this section, and I can still reference the view model. I could still do just name here, and that works, but I think what we're going to start showing in most of our docs is this dot when you're talking to the view model, and every other time you're going to be accessing variables. So this works, and there's a let helper that pending another fix to can stash works as well. It works directly if you're using can stash, but it doesn't work in components. But that will be fixed soon. So you can create local variables. You can do stuff like I can alias let the value equal thing dot value, and then I could use the value. But this isn't working right now because of a bug, and I think I forgot to create the wrong kind of context for that to work. But all of this should be out maybe today. Depends if Kevin has time to release that fix or not. Otherwise, definitely next week.
Hey, Justin, just curious, that let that you just showed, where would be, what would be the scope of it?
It's block level, so it's inside the for loop.
Okay.
So the cool thing about let, once it's fully working, is you could actually alias. You could set okay, I want this initial value to be null, and then if you had two, it kind of replaces scope vars. It does replace scope vars, so that if I had 2 subcomponents, like this example for driver's license, kind of there's a driver's list, and I wanted to have it selected, exported to the value. And then I wanted the driver, what we're editing, the driver that it takes to come from the value. So this kind of thing is what you use scope vars for, these local variables while you're looping through something. But you'd be able to use let now instead of that.
So that let helper didn't end up being like a section. We had talked about making it a section helper, right? You don't have to close this?
I can still make it a section helper, which would be nice for, I think, just scoping things. Like, let's say you had something like this and you really didn't want the value to be global, right? You didn't want anything else besides these two components to be able to access the value. Well, then you could change it to this, and now it kind of creates a little micro scope that only these things can talk to. But it works. I made it work so that it's not. It doesn't need to be global. It's accessing the current scope if you do it like this. But if you, and then it's accessing anything that creates blocks, essentially anything that creates a let block, which only right now is for. The for loop's the only thing that does that, and the let helper like this itself.
And components, once that lands.
Components, yeah, that's actually not the bug that I fixed. I still haven't fixed that. If whether should a components light DOM have a component, should this be a different let scope in here? I create variables in here, maybe. I don't know. I haven't decided, so I haven't done it yet.
Okay, cool.
I would say if that's the case, it should be true of any tags. I don't know if that would be specific to.
Yeah, right now it's not, and I wasn't really planning on making it. It definitely should. I mean, obviously you still have access to everything here, but if you did a let inside here, to me, if you had leak scope, you might want that. If it was like leaking the component into here, you might want that because then there is like kind of something different than the outside. But right now, without leak scope, the expectation is the scope in here is the same as the scope outside. So I don't see a reason to change, to create a new let scope here.
Right.
So, yeah.
So if you're inside of, where other scopes exist? Like width, if you're inside of a width, the let scope.
It does not create a let scope. Width doesn't. Because to me, width and let are let replaces width, and for replaces each, and there's not really a need for width and each when everything is done, in my opinion. Like
what about like if? Would that be?
If doesn't change the no. Yeah, I guess actually you're right. If should and those kind of helpers probably should.
Or unless, yeah.
Any block like this. Anytime you're doing a block like this, in my opinion, that should create probably should create a local context. I think that's what people would expect.
Yeah.
That has not been done yet. So currently only each creates that. So other helpers are, I might just make it so all helpers block level scope does that. I have not decided whether I want to allow control, because then the nice thing about that is people create custom helpers, they would get local context without having to do anything special. Again, I'm trying to, the goal is to release some basic stuff working. And if you look at the docs for it, I made it very specific that currently it only creates variables for the template and within the for expression. Like these don't exist, and you can't use let really. Let will only work in those two places. So I try to make in the docs that as clear as possible, and I use currently quite a bit to imply that this is, eventually there'll be more functionality around that.
Cool. Well, I'm working on DoneJS 3, and I've started to work on updating the guides. It'd be really nice. Let me know if you think this is possible to just use for of everywhere. Use this to refer to the view model.
Yeah, I believe it is.
And never have to use a .. / or never.
Yeah, there's like one or two. There's like two more bug fixes. That one I've made a PR, and there's like one more that I think it's solid for at least those two use cases. And that's all I've really needed it for. All those other helpers, I haven't needed to create a local contextual scope. And then even if you did right now, like you could always do, like, if you had an if foo, worst case right now is you could do let var, let thing equals abc.def kind of thing. You just create your own let like that.
Oh, so that does work. The block levels.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I haven't ever needed that actually.
Yeah, it's not.
Because typically in here, like you're not needing to create special variables. Maybe you are. I don't know. I guess I could see people doing like if foo, then I want like foo's name equal to foo dot name or something like that, and then you're doing like foo name dot first or something, so you're not having to repeat yourself as much. But I haven't had to do any of that.
Is it possible to update a let variable with aside from using a binding? Yeah, other than that. If you wanted to create foo name outside of that if statement, but set it to a value inside of the if statement. You know what I'm saying?
You mean get this outside of the block?
Like you create that let variable outside of this if.
What's the use case for that?
And then,
you're saying like you would do in JavaScript where you like, yeah. And now I'm going to set it.
And then in that if statement, you want to update it.
What?
If in this if statement, you want to update it to a value.
Yeah, I mean, a component could do that.
Component can, yeah.
Yeah, but there's no way.
Well, anything that can write to the scope, right? Like we don't have.
It's not like JavaScript where it's not like top level down execution, you know.
Matt, who's here, he's volunteered, and he's going to be the hero who adds simple setter shorthands to our binding syntaxes. I give it a hard time. He expressed interest, and then every time I keep implying he's going to have it done any moment. So you could theoretically do like an on-click, even in here. If that was there, then you could do like foo name is 3 or something.
Yeah, I just wonder if like we could do that with just a stash expression, just like foo name equals 3 in a.
Yeah, there's no. I mean, we'd have to. Someone has to make this work. This is like the oldest issue in can-stash bindings.
Yeah, no, I know that we need that, but I just mean like if you just want to set it in that if statement without a component.
You want to what?
You want to do like foo name equals 3 just inside of that if statement. Not with the component.
Well, that would be really weird. I mean, you could, but I think that would be. I would be very uncomfortable with that. Because you're using like if foo is that should be done in like a like your connected callback or something, or even better, like what is going on with foo name? Like I don't know that feels wrong to me. But heck, we could do it.
Yeah, I don't actually have a use case. I was just curious if you could do it, but
yeah. Well, I mean that's a way like people could do that kind of like event binding that we tell them to do in the value helper and connected callback. Like if this changes, set this to this. You could start doing that in your templates, but I would not encourage people to do that.
Oh boy,
so
this could be nice. I'm looking forward to how this changes the guide. It's going to be really nice, I think, if DoneJS 3, if every magic tag is referencing something, either this, which is a model, or a variable that you create. So it's very easy to tell where everything comes from.
Yeah, it was interesting. So like someone
Justin agrees.
Someone found a bug that was caused by this, and it took me 2 days to fix the bug, but having them just use the for of loop instead took like 5 seconds, and that worked. So, and made their template much less.
And this is still can-stash 4 point something, right? So that means people who are upgrading from 3 to 4, instead of doing the dots thing, they can jump directly to this, and makes it much easier to upgrade. Cool.
Harder to tell people about though. I thought about that though. Like the problem is you can't because they'd have to restructure their like each into a for loop, and the only way we could warn them is like, oh, you have this for loop above, change that to an each, and then you could just do this instead. And I don't feel like that's a very plausible like suggestions, other than like we just have to put that in the guide. Like when you get these warnings, you can just restructure it to look like this instead. But our warnings aren't going to tell you to do that. They're going to tell you to kind of do what they tell you to do now, which is unfortunate because it would be, at some point we're going to have to decide like what we're going to do about these old things. And I think what we're going to do is not what we did for 4.0 and just like break everything. I think we're much more likely to be like, we'll split stash into like stashy or like old, probably legacy stash, which would have like everything still in it. If we had to break like, you know, these new observables or things like that, it's basically works. And then there'd be like can stash, which would go to like the 5.0 version, which would remove all of the probably like scope varvars and just kind of focus on this way of doing things instead.
Yeah, it's also not easy to code mod from each to 4. Like the actual from each to 4 isn't hard, but it's all the things inside of it that are the problem. Like changing all your dots to this and stuff like that. So I know Greg started doing, Greg and Gitter started trying to do that, changing all of his with a regular expression, but then he had to like manually update all the stash expressions. So
it might be possible if we like stash itself's parser we could use to do that, but until we have like can parse based stash parser, it's not like what it's still very cumbersome to do those things with stash this parser directly.
All right, well, that leaves me. Hello, Matthew. I've worked on DoneJS last couple weeks, but I've been kind of focused on this routing issue. So actually I have a topic around this, but first let's just talk about what's changed. So define map is now the default for route.data. Probably not something you've actually used, but in the past, route.data was a simple map, which is it's sort of like a can map but simpler. So a simple map has a get function that you can provide it a key and get it to get a value, and it has a set function. But we already use define map everywhere else. You know, can component, it defaults to define map for its view model. So there's no reason for not to just have a define map, and define map is compatible with the can simple map API as well. So if anyone happened to be using that, hopefully nothing broke when we did this. I don't think there would be. But what's cool about this is that this means that what I'm kind of hoping for is that in the future we can prevent the whole cumbersome process of creating your application view model and then assigning that to route.data, and then having to like specify which properties you want to be serialized to the route and which properties you don't want to be serialized to the route. There'll just be this route.data, and that's just always bound to the route properties, which are these things that you specify when you register your routes. So in this example, route register, you have a page, which defaults to home. Is that now you can use the dot operator because this is the define map, and there's now a page property that can be you can get, and then conversely you can set it as well. So yeah, it gets rid of this thing. So this came in CanRoute 4.4. So yeah, CanRoute 4.4 has this now. This is pretty cool change. It's in oh, my dog doesn't like routing. I'm sorry. CanJS 5.9 is where you can see this in CanJS. So I don't know what else to say, but yeah, this is nice. One other thing it does is with your default values, it will try to infer the type. So I don't think I have an example here, but if this was like a number, it would infer that page is a number. It does that kind of thing. But yeah, cool. All right. Do we have any topics besides mine? Let's jump into mine because mine's related to this. So yeah, like I said, I'm working on this stuff because I'm working on DoneJS 3. If you go to donejs.github.io, it's hard to say, donejs.github.io/next. This is the documentation website for DoneJS 3 for the next version. It's always kind of like whatever new version we're working on. And if you go to the quick start guide and the in-depth guide, there's kind of my ideas for how to do routing. So anybody that's been following like kind of the latest developments in CanJS knows about we have these new constructible components which were introduced in CanJS 5, and the routing guide in CanJS, which Kevin just recently did, goes over how to use these kind of constructible components to to create a property that is always bound to like what your which component you kind of currently want to show. So in this guide, I'm trying to incorporate that sort of thing into DoneJS. So DoneJS for the longest time has had all this stuff kind of in the stash template, which makes a huge switch statement is what we use in the in-depth guide. Anyways, I'm kind of rambling, but this is kind of how I'm thinking it's gonna, or my initial thoughts is that the generators will generate with a route data property on your application view model, which is the route.data, like we're just talking about, which is, it's going to be a defined map. And to know what to display, you'll have a page component. You'll add this yourself, and then you can say, route.data.page, and then you can import that particular page, that component. You have to use .default to get the default for reasons I don't want to talk about.
That's really cool.
What's that?
That looks nice.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. Well, this is a very simple example. So,
does async get though work like that on a define map?
Yeah. This is a function. This is not a getter, right? This is a function that happens to be named get. But yeah, you can put async in front of any functions.
Sure, but then what is the behavior?
A promise, huh?
What is the behavior of? I mean, that actually works.
Yes. So this will return a promise. This is the same for if you forget about if I get rid of the async and I just returned a promise.
It's a synchronous getter.
This is not a getter. This is a function. It's confusing because the name of the function is get. But pretend this was called foo. It's just a function. It's just an async function.
Okay, but if it's foo, then that's just going to be ignored by can define.
All right, let me rewrite this somewhere.
Because it's not a registered property behavior that can define understands.
Can define understands promises though. Define map.extend.
Does it?
No.
Actually, huh? I don't think it does. I know that can observe does.
Wait.
Define map doesn't. You can't like return a promise and it just treats it as a promise.
Yes, it does treat it as a promise. Yes, correct. So I'm going to write this the old school way, and then hopefully this will illustrate.
Yeah, you're just going to return a promise in there, right?
Yeah, which is exactly what my code does.
But it's still a getter, right?
It's not a getter. It's not. It is okay. It's a defined map getter. It's not a JavaScript getter. Yes.
Yeah, but it's giving a promise. It's not giving the component. It's resolving to a promise. So that should actually be like page component promise property, not page component.
Well, we can bike shed on what we call the things.
But I guess my point is we could actually like can observe with Ilum and stuff like that. And if you're not using Ilum, can't observe. If there's the async, there's like the async decorator, and that if you return a promise, it's like the async it's like the async getter. It does the same behavior. So like that's I was just like, could we detect that async was used? I don't know if it's possible.
I don't think we want that though. I think you want to be able to use the promise metadata.
Yeah, you want the promise. If I show my
that is loading.
Yeah, normally you do. You're right. You normally do.
In this case, you do.
Errors happen or something like that, and in a production like solid application, you do. But there's a lot of times I'm just saying in CanJS in general, you don't really need the promise. You just need an async getter, and it would be cool if there was like a syntax that you could just we use the async thing. I mean, it works in Ilum right now. It's nice. You just async and decorate, and the promise you return promise, but it'll take the value out. I don't know, if you could just do async getter like that and it would pull out the value, that would be awesome. But anyways,
Yeah, these are functional. These are exactly the same. So the async keyword just happens to return a promise. So any changes, any kind of weird stuff you want to do, I would do the same thing as if for stuff that returns promises. Maybe, yeah, like you said, maybe there could be a decorator that says get the value or something.
Or just make async get or something as the property.
Oh, so you're saying if you do like this, then it's gonna.
Then it's actually going to give you the component instance instead of a promise that resolves the component instance.
So what is it going to be while it's loading though?
Blank. I'm not saying you would use it for
this. Yeah.
Like, there's a million other uses for async getters. I was just like, wow, that'd be cool if like because it literally reads async get. It's like, oh, that'd be.
Yeah. Well, I was wanting to do like an actual getter, but you can't make those async. I don't know why. Okay.
So other thing, while we're talking about what works, does that default route data work like that, or does that warn you every time?
I don't know. I haven't tried it. It probably does warn you.
I think you have to make it a function that returns.
Yeah, you have to make it. So I need to update that to January. What he's saying is it's what is it? Route beta. Yeah, I had it as default. I thought about that recently about that beta, but you're right. It needs to be like that. So yeah.
Yeah.
Plug in my code. All right. So we only got halfway through this little part. The other part is that your template becomes this. And if you've looked at the current DoneJS, let me see if I can find what that looks like. The current DoneJS guide. Kind of, yeah, we're just moving stuff around. We're moving dynamic stuff out of the template and into the JavaScript.
So sorry, Matthew. One quick concern that I think we should make an issue about, if we haven't already, that I think Kevin found, was that essentially there's a problem where if like your route. Essentially, if your route changed and you were reading a property, but you were actually coming back to the original component, you see that loading flash. And we talked about you maybe use the value helper, which could be a little smart and kind of keep track of what your last resolved component was, so it could reuse that in memory. It's like,
are you saying if you switch back and forth really quickly? Is that what you're saying?
No, it's like if you're let's say your getter for some reason read ID as well.
Okay.
Like if there was no ID, you did this, but then if there was an ID that was truthy, you did this other page details page, let's say.
Okay.
But if the ID changed from like 5 to 6, you don't want to recreate a component. What you really want to do is just like allow the binding that you might have set up already to update the subcomponent that's already in the page, its ID. So you're never flashing loading as there's like a new component generated and all that other code is run. This is something we talked about. Kevin's probably right that the secret to this is just like, or use the value operator or whatever, but it still feels
yeah,
weird.
I thought about that.
Yeah, it's like what you'd almost want is, yeah, I don't know. That's what I said. Like, it's almost worth an issue that just tracks it and like provides suggestions for now. And if there's something. Like we talked about maybe making a simplified version of the router, simple route or something that's like everybody else's router.
Yeah, I wrote an issue for that.
Okay, you did have an issue for that? That just like can handle this and be like, well, you map to the same component, so we're going to be smart enough and do all that like memory for you.
Yeah, you need your page component getter. Like its only dependency can be like the top of the page or whatever whatever property actually changes to a different component.
Well, it can't. It's gotta like in the in-depth guide. It's gonna depend on more than that. But maybe what you're saying is it's
that's a problem. That's what I'm saying. It's like
it's not typical that you would navigate to the same component. Probably.
It kind of is.
Is it?
Yeah, I mean, like if you have different IDs for the same.
I know, but would you, if you're on like a product 12,
you're not going to go to 13. You might hit next.
There might be.
Next.
There might be links to other products and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we can conclude that we need like an issue to discuss this and come up with like a resolution that doesn't involve complex value writing, you know, like the value behavior to get that, to nail it. We should make something that simplifies it.
Yeah, it's a hard one. I wonder. That is a hard one.
What you could do is show, loading, but while that other promise, and then you can just reshare it. I don't know. Anyways.
Okay. Yeah, I want to show the let me just search for page component version of this for the in-depth guide, which is a little bit more complex. So the first version is pretty simple. I did it as a switch statement. It's exactly the same. Just creates a new instance of the components after it imports them, and like I said, this stays the same. One huge benefit of one thing I really like about this. So like in the past we've always had the dynamic can imports, and those have always been confusing to people, understandably. So we probably wouldn't need to use those anymore. Right? I mean, I don't think we'd really ever need to use those anymore. And we also wouldn't have to use the can tag. The can tag the problem that the can tag solved was that it became very repetitive. Let me see if I can find the old version. It became very repetitive to like do if is resolved inside of every can import. So we created can tag to be a way to be like, well, this thing is your loading component, and you can just put your loading logic inside of that, and that was
gross and terrible.
Yeah, it was terrible. So we won't need that anymore because it will always just look like this. There's always just going to be, well, except for the problem that we just talked about. Maybe we'll see, but yeah, ideally this is what setting your component looks like. So you can just put your loading stuff in that side of here. No more can tag. Awesome, cool. All right, so let me see. This is the simple version, and where's the more complex one? No, I have it.
By the way, Kevin, while he's finding this, I think, well, so I noticed that, you know, we get a lot of warnings like there is no value property on a promise kind of thing because can reflect has own key isn't implemented on promises.
Yeah.
I thought it would be also really cool if, like, well, one, we should implement that correct there. And two, maybe when we give those warnings, we should do like what I know like DocumentJS did, which is you do the what's it called? The Venschenstein distance. I don't, it starts with an L. And you figure out like all the other keys and you give a suggestion. Did you mean, you know, like Git does? That'd be nice. Like if someone is resolved all lowercase, it'd be like, did you mean is resolved?
That would be cool. Sounds hard.
Oh, it's actually really easy. There's libraries that do it.
You lost me at Venschenstein distance.
Well, there's libraries that basically tell you, given a string, what is the closest string that matters. And you could just loop through all the object keys and then just put that and what the person wrote and just provide suggestions based off of that.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, so I was trying to find the old version too. So the old version, so once we started adding more pages, like to be able to order stuff in the restaurant details page, this is what it used to look like. It was a couple of nested switch statements inside of the stash. Oops, where is it? Oh, wrong tab. So I turned it into this. So you still have kind of that master switch for the page. And in the case of restaurant, we're also looking at the slug property on route data and looking at the action and then doing. So this is a case where we're actually passing a view model. We're actually doing bindings.
To me, it's like a testament to await and async, how much nicer this code looks than I thought it was going to look when you started.
Right. Yeah. Well, I haven't actually tested this, so I'm pretty sure this works. I think it works, but yeah, it looks okay. I mean, you know,
you could add some spacing.
Yeah. Yeah. I was debating between doing the switch or just having if page is equal home, doing it if else. I don't know if necessarily better, but I think for the simpler case, the switch works pretty well. But yeah, I think this works okay. So everyone agree that this is a good way we're going to do the full binding like this and stuff? Sure, why not?
What do the new folks here think? So this is how you might do routing in DoneJS and CanJS, where you've got progressive loading. Matthew, can you make that bigger?
Yeah. It's not that big. I don't know if I can.
You can make your screen also, just make it full screen.
Lost it.
So you need to basically, to set the problem, you need to map like your properties on your like route data to modules, and then from those modules you need to get new components. So in short, like if your page was home page, you're going to import the home component, get the home component, and create the home component. If it's restaurants, but there's a slug, which means it's for a specific restaurant, you're gonna, and you're ordering, you're gonna get to the order new component and then create an instance of that and return it. And that's basically the pattern, is you're like checking your properties based on what they are, and then returning you. That makes sense. I mean, it's a lot with the await and stuff like that, but how it makes you feel. Yeah. You got a not terrible from a British person. It's great for an American.
I think it's much better. I think it's still hard. I think people are going to have trouble.
Well, I mean, I think any framework is going to have, I mean, you know what I mean? Like, what framework is not going to have this problem to some degree?
Vue, React.
Why wouldn't they? They're going to do it all in JavaScript too, right?
Yeah, but they just have like a mapping object, basically. Let's you just.
Oh, so you're saying because our routing is
just
not
configuration, yeah.
I don't think this means we shouldn't still pursue the configurable version of a simple routing solution. But I do think, it's nice to have like the full gun, like anything is possible approach, which this is. So
cool. Everyone likes it. Yay. So yeah, I guess again, you got me thinking about that problem is that we want it not to respond when, in this case, we want it to not respond when slug changes. If we're currently on slug,
yeah, it's
we
like
we want this binding to happen. We want this to update, but we don't want this to re-trigger.
What you would want is like somehow like checking whatever the component is returned, and if it was the exact same type of component, like and had almost the same the same view model kind of object was passed to it, be like, no, we're just gonna use one. It's almost like you want like a diff here.
I think it's like since you have that value from inside of it, you don't want the outer binding to happen. You know what I mean? You want like the value from to react, but not the if this, that route, that slug.
That's an interesting point. That's an interesting observation, Kevin. I wonder if there's something that could be done because of that. It's like we're inferring. I don't know.
It's like we know something internal is already handling this binding, so we don't need the bigger.
Well, you would if slug changed, but action also changed.
Yeah, but then that would be triggered by action changing, right?
Oh, that's right. Well,
I don't know. Hypothetically, it would.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, it's tough. Anyways, I'm glad people seem to like it. Aside from that gaping problem, it's pretty good. So, all right. Well, in that case, I'll pursue this as the new strategy. Yeah. The only other question: should we? I guess we keep the dot components. We were thinking about having a convention. I kind of showed that in the quick start. But these guides don't really do it that way, so I don't know if we want to change the guides or just not show the convention. But we talk about
putting them into like a page
or like a component or pages. I guess it could be pages.
I don't know. I like kind of pages and then components for like more UI low level stuff. But bike shedding, I don't care.
But should we have that convention? Because that's not how this guide works. There's I think it's home dot component.
This is the kind of thing that you should write up in like an issue if you haven't already, and post it to like the Tovi in general, because then there'll be like a million. Everybody wants you'll get a lot of input on stuff like this, in my opinion.
Well, I don't know if we get input on the guide. It's more of a guide question because the guide.
Well, it does lead people to how they organize their DoneJS applications.
Yeah.
It's almost like you need a separate page generator.
Well, you'd have to get rid of dot components, basically.
I get what you're saying. Yeah. The reason is because like you saw what I think Frank or whatever created that issue, and then someone else like, we just start inferring from the import statement like what the bundles config is? And the problem is if we had everything in components, like you would try to bundle components that weren't page components.
We do infer the bundles based on dynamic can imports. So we won't be doing that anymore. I hadn't thought about that.
Oh, you're talking about because they're in the template.
Yeah, in the template we used to. The Dynamo render, does that. It finds those dynamic ones and it adds them to the bundles in Steel.
How can you do that?
That's probably not very easily, unless you run a JavaScript parser.
Well, we do have one.
Well, we do. It's true.
We have Tracer. I mean, does Tracer get rid of those?
Not Tracer.
Babel. Does Babel get rid of those ASTs? Are they still lingering around for us to sniff?
I think I keep them around. Yeah. I think it still does.
Go sniffing.
Go sniffing. That's true. It's true. Yeah.
But if we had like DoneJS add page, you could just do it easily.
Yeah, I mean,
we have the bundles config. I mean, it's really the bundles config anyways. Like, and that's what I'm saying. If we just did it we have the bundles config. It works with a glob pattern. So if they were all in like a components pages folder, and then everything else, then that solves it right there. We just glob everything in component pages. We generate that as part of the application initialization, and then no one ever has to change it. Just make sure you put the things that you want progressively bundled in components pages.
Right.
Done. There.
Right.
Solved. Right? And then the A+ version of this, though, is like we look at the AST, we figure out what they're importing. But even then, you would still want a special folder because you wouldn't want every single component to be bundled that way.
Yeah.
So in the end, we need a special place for page level component.
Well, it's just you couldn't write this in a generic way that works for modulet types, but also for dot component files is the only issue. I don't know.
Do you guys want to get rid of dot component file?
Well, I was gonna talk about that. Kind of. It's weird to me because I know in Vue though they have the same kind of thing and they're very popular. Like people love them.
I can ask.
I think we should keep them, but not use them for pages. Like you can use them for presentational components, which is what Vue recommends, I think.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I guess they are really popular.
They are really popular. I just don't know why maybe we just haven't given them enough care. They haven't. I don't know.
I mean, we have at least one client that uses them very extensively.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe more people use them. Maybe just us. I don't know. But yeah, I guess we could do that. We could have it for pages. Just don't do it that way. That just means that in the DoneJS chat guide, we wouldn't be showing them at all, which is, I don't know.
Yeah.
Not a huge deal. I don't know. I'll think about it. It's basically, do I want to rewrite the guide? To that degree. I don't know if I do or not. All right. Do we have any other topics?
So just about the reason why is just because like now we have components that are like, we show all the time, write your component and it has a template, or you write your view and it's got the string template, whatever there. We show that all the time. So it's weird. Like we have like the modlet version where your view is in a totally different file from your component, and then we have this. Now we have like what we show in CanJS everywhere, which you just have your component, everything's right there. And now we've got this like third version, which is like everything is inside of a single file. I think what, at least talking to the Vue folks here, it's popular because you get it's already pre-processed your view. Is that why it's popular, you think? Or?
Like for your demo page, you've got a template, you've got JavaScript, you've got your styles.
Yeah.
Those are all separate.
Yeah.
And if it comes to like you've got a file.
Yeah.
Whereas like you have one file and it's like everything.
Yeah.
That's all.
Well, people like it.
I think Kevin's right that people do, even DoneJS users do like it as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So what are the three things I don't understand? The one is like the dot component file. That's where it's kind of template centric.
Yeah, as a lesser CSS is in there as well. Everything's in there. Versus like we have our components, which are like what CanJS style component, where like there's an inline template, and then we have the modlet form where like everything's broken out.
Yeah.
So we have like three versions is basically all I was saying, and that feels like a little much. And what I was asking is if it was just because of the eval list and you get the pre-processed templates, well, we could actually have CanStash. We could have CanJS, see that there's a component. We could actually almost have like a special, like we identify it's a component, a special steel plugin, and then transpile inline that template, where if you see view : template literal, we could actually transpile inline in the build a stash like inline call, so it doesn't have to parse it and everything. But if that's not really the reason why people are doing it, that doesn't make sense. It's just weird that we have three different ways, but whatever.
Yeah. Components stay, people like them. All right, do we have any other topics to discuss? No? Cool. All right, this is a good one. Thanks to all you DoneJSers. In 2 weeks, will we be together for one of these? Or is that, am I thinking that's...
That'll be maybe in 4 weeks.
Monday after.
Yeah, we won't be, you're right. We won't be. Well, anyways, we'll be doing a DoneJS community hangout either way. See everyone in a couple weeks.
See y'all.
Yeah.